Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the AM Report for HAPS News, the network of now. It is a Friday, Wednesday, Tuesday. I don't know anymore. I really don't, because it's still 2020 as far as I'm concerned. It's Friday, January 8th, 2021. And this morning I'll be joined by Miranda Yavor. She's a political scientist and postdoctoral scholar at UCLA. We'll discuss the invokement of the 25th Amendment or impeachment. These are the consequences on the table for Donald Trump. This morning, we're learning that House Democrats may plan to introduce articles of impeachment as early as next week. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all of today's top headlines today on the AM Report. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the program. I'm Alex Mahajer. If you're watching on the HAPS app, website, or platform, click the award button. Let us know you're enjoying it. Or if you're watching on Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, wherever you may be watching, leave us a comment. We'll bat around with you live on air. We've got a lot of people chiming in already this morning. Good morning for Mark Goldman. Thank you for the Appreciate You Award. Let's see. Kelly. I can't, I don't have my glasses. It looks like Kelly Clarkson, but I'm going to just look here. Kelly Crimson is saying, impeach. He does not deserve any political office rights. Yes, of course. We're going to talk about the consequences of impeachment with Miranda in just a moment, but put a pin in that. And thank you all for joining this morning. Leave us a comment so we can bat around with you live on air. We've got some headlines to cover this morning before we get into it. First and foremost, thank God. The Pfizer vaccine appears to be able to, it appears it will still be effective against the mutation and new variants. We're learning today the COVID-19 vaccine will still work against variants and mutations. The U.S., this is coming as we learned that the U.S. has recorded its 5 most deadly days in the past 2 weeks since the outset of the pandemic, more than 4,000 deaths yesterday alone. We're talking about a 9/11 scale mass casualty event every single day. So everybody please mask up. This is we're approaching the apex actually right now. So the rats are fleeing the sinking ship. Lots of Trump resignations and including cabinet members amidst the Capitol insurgency that happened just, 2 days ago now. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao was the first, and then yesterday, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos came hours later, citing Trump's incitement to violence, despite the fact that Betsy DeVos's brother, Eric, is the CEO and founder of Blackstone, which is, it's like basically security for hire, but they're like private military. So very interesting and bizarre, but we're going to talk about the reasons why right now with Miranda Yavor. She's a political scientist, postdoctoral scholar from UCLA. Good morning, Miranda.
Good morning, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We talk a lot about how it's a really dumb time to be alive, and I feel like you agree. I mean, has 2020 actually ended, or are we stuck in some perpetual hellish loop?
I think that it's 2020 until January 20th. I think that as long as Donald Trump's president, it's going to feel like 2020.
Right. So today's technically December 39th. Thanks, everybody, for joining. New Year's Eve still. So, Miranda, before we get into it, I want to play this video of Nancy Pelosi on the House floor yesterday. This is Nancy Pelosi calling for Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment or threatening impeachment. Here's Pelosi.
I don't know if the word good is a way to describe it, but because yesterday, the President of the United States incited an armed insurrection against America. The gleeful desecration of the U.S. Capitol, which is the temple of our American democracy, and the violence targeting Congress are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history, instigated by the President of the United States. That's why it's such a stain. In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I join the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this President by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. That is the overwhelming sentiment of my caucus.
So Miranda, did you catch this video yesterday, and what did you think of it from the outset?
Yeah, full disclosure, I joined about 1,500 political scientists in writing an open letter calling for the removal of the president, whether by the 25th Amendment or by impeachment. So I believe that Nancy Pelosi was absolutely right to call for this. It was an incitement to violence. It was an incitement to an attempted coup, and he can't be trusted to continue to lead this democracy, such as it is right now. So I do think that was right. I think that we have spent a lot of time right now already waiting for the 25th Amendment to be invoked, and at this point, we don't have a lot of time left to wait. And I think that it's time for them to introduce articles of impeachment, especially because if the president is convicted, he would be removed from future office, so he wouldn't be able to run in 2024.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, the differences. And I'll note that the breaking news this morning is that it appears House Democrats have announced that they will introduce articles of impeachment as early as next week. Before we get into the details of invoking versus the impeachment, yesterday, as soon as this happened, we saw basically that the cabinet members are starting to jump ship. Is this because they're afraid to invoke the 25th Amendment themselves or to vote on it? And will you explain how that process would have worked had it happened?
Yeah, so the 25th Amendment happens when the vice president and half or more of the cabinet decides that the president is unable to discharge their duties. Now, it's usually for a medical reason, like a stroke, or it might be because the president is going under anesthesia. So that's a typical way that the 25th Amendment is invoked. But in this case, it would be because the president is unfit to run a democracy right now. But the fact that there are all of these protest resignations absolutely impedes the use of the 25th Amendment. My cynical interpretation is that they don't really want to remove the president, but they want to extract him from their reputations. Because if they really cared, they would contribute to his removal, and they're not. They're just trying to save their own asses.
Yeah, and we have a comment saying she needs to impeach today from Carrie Lewis. So why didn't Nancy Pelosi just move to impeach him right away? Why did she put this on Pence to invoke the 25th before taking the extraordinary route of impeaching a sitting president again for the second time?
So one reason was that the 25th Amendment could be a faster route to removing him, whereas with impeachment you have to go through both chambers of Congress, and there's probably skepticism about whether the Senate would vote to convict and remove. So if it only passes the House, then he's impeached again, and he has that stain of being impeached twice, but he's not going anywhere. And so it probably came down to a combination of sort of the expeditious nature of the 25th Amendment, if the votes are there, and as well as the reality of the Senate not necessarily voting to convict.
And do I understand the 25th Amendment incorrectly? Isn't it true that the Congress must also approve when if the cabinet members vote to invoke the 25th, that then a 2/3 majority of the Congress must also approve it?
So if the president, so my understanding of the 25th Amendment is that if the president objects to the use of the 25th Amendment, then Congress needs to be able to. to approve it.
Okay.
And in this case, because it's not just like he's going under anesthesia for surgery. It's that the president is being forcibly removed, and so in that case, there would need to be congressional support for the move.
Okay, I got you. And speaking of Trump, yesterday evening, after being suspended on, he's been suspended on Facebook until after the inauguration. Twitter suspended him for 24 hours. Apparently, he now has posting access again, and he posted a video to Twitter last night that was a little bit unusual for him. It was the closest I've ever seen, and forgive me for a lack of a better word, it was the closest I've seen to him eating shit and backpedaling that I've ever seen from the man. Closest thing we're going to get to a concession, I think. And I had a hard time understanding what his motivation was. Let's play this for our viewers, and I want to ask you about it, Miranda.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. We have just been through an intense election, and emotions are high. But now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
Donald Trump cares about a smooth and orderly transition of power after what is the most horrific display on our nation's Capitol building, I think, in anyone's lifetimes.
I think the orderly transition of power is already out the window because of what's happened.
It's already out the window. And can you explain a little bit about so first of all, what did you think of this speech? Is he just afraid of being removed? Like what was his motivation? Because I know that he doesn't care about anything that he just said. And if we have a commenter, Sabrina, who said someone wrote that for him, and I have to agree. What are your thoughts on this? And what is his motivation for releasing a video like this?
I mean, I'm sure that he was hearing that there were talks about the 25th Amendment and impeachment, and he was hoping that by following his staff's advice and giving this prepared speech, he would be able to avoid consequences for his incitement to an insurrection. I don't think that that's going to be the case. The House is already moving toward articles of impeachment. And he's already tweeted today, sort of doubling down on the patriots who were fighting for him. And so I think that it's always really good to remember that whenever he has always been able to eventually do the correct prepared speech in response to something heinous. But, the new tone takes just don't last well because he's always going to go back on Twitter or in a press conference and revert to his normal self.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Miranda, I think the other thing is that we have to consider is that he wants to be able to pardon the people he wants to pardon, and he can't do that if he's removed. And Bloomberg released a list of Trump's potential pardons yesterday. Preemptive pardons are being floated for Kimberly Guilfoyle, Donald Trump Jr., Albert Pirro, who's the ex-husband of Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, chief of staff Mark Meadows, Stephen Miller, his social media director Dan Scavino, Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, Rudy Giuliani, which begs the question. I mean, this list gives me like heart palpitations and such an uneasy stomach, because like after the display on our nation's capital and the lack of commitment to democracy, this president will now pardon his close inner circle for crimes we don't even know what they are.
Well, I think the more important thing is that on that list of potential pardons was Donald Trump himself. Now, most legal scholars would say that the president can't pardon himself, but the fact that he's going to try, and is something that should give everyone chills, and is all the more reason to remove his pardon power by removing him from office.
It's nauseating. So it looks like the House will introduce articles of impeachment early next week. We will see. We know that
I wish it were today.
What was that?
I wish it were going to be today.
I don't know why it's not today. I feel like if your goal is to protect against harmful attacks on our democracy, then every minute is of the essence. But where they're going to introduce articles of impeachment as early as next week is what I'm hearing. And we know that the Senate would still need to vote. 2/3 majority would need to vote. That's 67 senators in order to remove Donald Trump from office, to convict and remove him. That likely isn't going to happen. So we'll see what happens with this. But I want to thank Miranda Yaver, a political scientist, postdoctoral scholar. Miranda, a good friend of the program. Where can people find you and support you?
I'm on Twitter at Miranda Yaver. Reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. Thanks so much for joining this morning. We got some questions. The list sounds like heartburn, says Sabrina. Another user says, for crimes not even charged yet, which is, really, I think what is really stunning is what crimes did they commit, Donald? It's an admission of crime. It's an admission of guilt. What a crock, says Grace. Anyway, thanks, Miranda, for joining. We'll see you next week, hopefully.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Happy New Year.
You too.
All right, this has been the AM Report for Hatch News, the network of Now. We are live every weekday morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, with all of your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this journalism, if you like this content, please consider sponsoring it. You can subscribe or sponsor it or become a recurring monthly patron, or buy me a cup of coffee, or just subscribe for notifications to know when we go live. You can do that at haps.tv/@Alex. We will be back on Monday, and stay safe out there, everybody, and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.